Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break. There has been much in the news recently about water quality, both in East Palestine and even in our own Lake Erie. And while Brian Stubbs is not able to join us this morning, we are thrilled to welcome Ebie Holst, also from the Cleveland Water Alliance. Ebie is the Director of Clusters and Innovation. This position caps a long career in studying and solving for water issues. Ebie was founder and CEO of SplashLink.com, a web-based one-stop resource for water industry stakeholders to find capital, projects, and expertise. Ebie served as the interim director for Jet Inc., a wastewater treatment solutions company, and spent a dozen years at PricewaterhouseCoopers and in Silicon Valley in information technology. Ebie is a sought-after speaker and consultant on strategic design and innovation, startups, water issues, market intelligence, smart water, and regional water challenges. In addition, Ebie served on the Environmental Technologies Advisory Committee for the U.S. Department of Commerce, and somehow finds time to also serve on the board of directors for EcoThrive. EcoThrive helps underserved communities around the world.
So thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And I was just telling Angela how cool I think these mini lunch breaks are, with just giving like a flavor of the things going on around Cleveland. So I'm excited to give you a taste of what Cleveland Water Alliance is doing as well. So just a little bit of background about the Cleveland Water Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been around since 2014. We've got a wide range of partners that we work with that are really focused on the water industry. For example, Odie and Moen, big brand names here in the region. Parker and Eaton also have really significant plays in the water industry. And we're also building some bridges around our universities and the depth of expertise that we're developing there. We work with over 100 water industry partners, utilities and research institutions, both across the state and well beyond the state and the country. And our primary funding has been essentially from the public sector, about 1.2 million from the U.S. Economic Development Administration really helped us kick off some of the programming I'm going to tell you about. And then last year, some funding from the state of Ohio has really amplified some of our investments. So here are just 4 of our key programs. We actually have a couple of additional ones, but these are all programs that we've been nurturing over the last several years. Open Innovation Challenges essentially mean that we put out requests for innovation and technology where there are market gaps. The Water Technology Test Beds are locations and equipment we make available to innovators for them to trial their technology under real-world conditions. Our Volunteer Science Network has been spreading all over the Lake Erie Basin and has been adopting standards in how data is collected amongst volunteer scientists. And then our Smart Lake Erie Watershed, which is going to be the focus of what I'm going to talk about with you today. So a little bit about our Lake Erie Watershed here. Lake Erie is the shallowest and most dynamic of the Great Lakes, and it's the warmest of the Great Lakes. And that combination translates to some pretty cool things, like it's the most biodiverse and the most bioproductive of the Great Lakes, but it also makes it the most vulnerable to the many activities that surround Lake Erie, such as agriculture, maritime, manufacturing, and our own community uses of it. So it supports about 12 million in population and 11 million drinking water residents. So we really have utilities all along the coast that reach into Lake Erie to grab water and bring it inland and treat that water and provide it to residents. But we also have some challenges around Lake Erie. Many of you may be aware of the harmful algal blooms. This has probably been getting the most publicity over the last several years since 2014, when the city of Toledo had to shut down its water utility because of the cyanotoxin that got into the water supply. But we also have other issues. We're seeing rising water temperatures, rising water levels, microbial contaminants, significant oxygen level fluctuations, which can have a direct impact on the chemistry that's used to treat water for drinking water purposes. And historically, the way that we've tracked water quality has been a very manual process. So literally sending people out to get water samples from the water, bringing it back to a lab, testing for various things. For example, if you hear about a beach closing, generally speaking, that's 2 days old information that beach closing is based on, because a water sample is taken manually, it's brought back to the lab, and it takes about 2 days for them to identify E. coli in a water sample. And E. coli is usually the contaminant used to close down a beach with water quality concerns. So, when we look at the various different things that we need to take into account on our really precious water supplies here, we started looking at, how do we make this a smarter water quality process of how we're monitoring and how we're safeguarding our public health and our future. And we really were looking at what that might mean. So, we want more data points because, for example, if someone goes out and does a water sample, grabs a water sample, what that analysis tells us is about the place, the water quality of the place where that water was sampled from. So if we only have 10 different water samples, that tells us about those 10 different locations specifically, but not necessarily about the broader water supply. And then we also want some of that data to be faster, more dynamically available, and that it enables different utilities, for example, or decision makers to make decisions in a dynamic way. So how does that translate to infrastructure? Well, again, 21st century, that would probably mean some option of real-time data being available to us, maybe automated, maybe crowdsourced, web accessible, and dynamic, evolving. So the more information we get, the more we can respond and potentially modify some of the environment that we're working in. So we really started looking at how we could enable this in our Lake Erie watershed. And one of the big things that we were hearing about from utilities about them, why they were or weren't adopting IoT or Internet of Things technologies that are automated and often in real time. And the big feedback that we heard was that, if you have a cell phone, you're transmitting some piece of data, whether it's your voice or a text, and that requires a cell line, and that can get really expensive. So if you have a sensor device, for example, and you need a cell line to support all the data coming off of that sensor device, and that's running $70 to $90 a month, well, that gets really expensive really fast, not to mention the device itself. So we started looking at how we might be able to address that. And what Cleveland Water Alliance started to do was building out our own telecommunications infrastructure over the Lake Erie watershed. So to date, we've actually put in about 6,200 square miles of coverage of what is primarily called LoRaWAN technology, which is, for the geeks in this crowd, long-range wide area network that actually enables us to host hundreds of sensors for each gateway rather than a one-to-one cell line for one sensor device. And it has a really nice long range from 1 mile to 10-mile range. And over time, we will be building out this network to cover about 12,000 square miles over the Lake Erie watershed within the next 1.5 to 2 years. These are our tower climbers. We literally have tower climbers helping us put this in place. So what does that actually mean? That means that under this umbrella, just like when you have a cell phone and you're in a rural area and you're trying to get a signal, this actually enables getting a signal for our Internet of Things devices. And we can now put sensors in places we may not have been able to do it before. So creeks and ponds and beaches and marinas, on the sides of boats if we want to, and be able to really equip our watershed with all kinds of different sensors to give us information about our water quality. The other thing that this also does is it provides us with a world-class testbed for Internet of Things technologies. So we can host now technology innovators from all over the world to come and trial their technologies here. So far, we've got 21st century infrastructure in place that's real-time, automated, dynamic. And now we're also putting in place the actual IoT devices. So we're deploying over 200 different IoT devices. That map is not actually, that's just sort of a projection of what it might look like. But as we're deploying these devices again for the test bed, it gives us technology that provides a benchmark to validate how other devices are performing. So the other aspect of this is also that volunteer science network, because volunteer science network, especially as we're introducing standards in how data is collected, becomes another source of data for us to consider in looking at water quality. And with this expansion of different sources of data, we can look at things from weather to water properties and biological nutrients, such as like harmful algal blooms. But it also means that we can start exploring areas that have never really had sensors and automated devices in the past and look for innovators to respond to those market gaps, like microplastics, PFAS, and other technology needs. And of course, all of these devices are now streaming data. So now we have that 21st century infrastructure in place, real-time automated, crowdsourced, web accessible, dynamic, learning, evolving, and this can be put to use for our community. So, you know, some of this data coming off of a buoy may be able to be accessed by kayakers to tell them what the wave height is and you know, whether or not there's a change in temperature. And we can also use it for early warning systems. So looking at E. coli around beach closures, we can actually get more real-time information in advance or see trends of E. coli spreading to give us information about where we should be concerned about water quality. And that is what we're doing around water quality for Lake Erie.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. You just touched on it. So E. coli is a common problem, but what other types of things are you able to detect in water besides E. coli that would be a public health concern, and how does that help us?
So thanks for asking, Angela. Well, E. coli is probably the biggest concern when it comes to public health. So we use that as an indicator of different types of biological contaminants in water. And it's probably the highest demand for automated real-time sensing out there. And it hasn't been solved yet. We have a couple of companies from around the world that are coming here and setting up some different trials for us to evaluate whether it can be done and how well it can be done. But other things of concern might be, for example, maybe some of you have heard about hormones are getting into our lake or microplastics and so forth. And some of these things have also not yet been solved. We're really still in the very young stages of automated sensing around water quality. So this is something that we're going to be pushing out, leveraging our world-class test bed to try and pull in innovators, create those solutions and establish them here, grow their businesses here, and create jobs here.
That's incredible. You did talk about inviting innovators from all over the world to come here. In what other ways can the Great Lakes region be a model for the rest of the country and really the world at large when it comes to the future of our water resources?
Well, I think, one of the really interesting things about our own history here in Cleveland is, in fact, anchored in the fact that we had that fire on the Cuyahoga River. And as it turns out, because of that river fire, we have a depth of expertise that's almost unequaled anywhere else in the world. So we have about 200 companies with water-related expertise within around a 5-county area. And that provides us with a really interesting kind of ecosystem for all kinds of additional innovation opportunities here in the region. So one of the things that Cleveland Water Alliance has been doing has been also inviting innovators to come and do trials here. And if it's for a specific solution, so, for example, it's something that might be a new way to treat wastewater at a utility. Cleveland Water Alliance provides insurance underwriting for some of those trials so that we're removing the risk for utilities to try things they've never tried before. The other thing too is that this telemetry infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure I was just describing, provides us with a really nice backbone for doing all kinds of other IoT work, whether it's water or not. So one of the things that we've been looking at with Case Western Reserve is how they might leverage this infrastructure to look at air quality and how that's impacting public health, for example, in partnership with some of our healthcare facilities in the region. So we have some really interesting opportunities that are very cutting edge as a result of some of this work.
Are there similar efforts underway in other Great Lakes regions?
There's nothing else in this country that's happening that's in any way similar to what we're doing. Probably the closest would be some work that's being done in the Netherlands. They also have a test bed kind of approach, and also in South Korea and Singapore both have a real focus on enabling different types of technologies to trial and then providing an ecosystem around those technologies to further develop and accelerate into the marketplace. So we have something very unique. That said, it's also something that's going to need ongoing investment. So for example, we have primarily what I imagined was this LoRaWAN technology. And at the speed that technology changes, we're going to need to continue investing in that. That means, in some areas for the geekier folks on this call, we may want to invest in LTE, or we may want to invest in 5G types of technology so that we're not only sending sensor data, but potentially we're interacting with what's happening when something is detected, more on the automation side. So if cyanotoxin is detected within a mile of a water utility intake, potentially that automatically triggers a valve that closes the intake for a period of time. That's the kind of thing that requires a little more sophisticated bandwidth to enable those types of applications.
So doing a lot of this, kind of paving the way in this work, how do you at the Cleveland Water Alliance create and utilize collaborations with other organizations to advance your work?
So we have some pretty extensive collaborations in place. One of the more recent ones that we're really excited about is a collaboration with an organization called Argonaut. Argonaut is a nonprofit here in the Cleveland area that's focused on working with Cleveland Metropolitan School District students and providing them with opportunities in both air and water. So it's literally getting students out on boats, getting them familiar and comfortable with the water. They have currently a program that makes use of the Port Authority's Flotsam and Jetsam, which are two little boats that go around the Cuyahoga River and help pull out trash from the water. And they also, as of this last year, have started working with Cleveland Water Alliance to help with the deployment of our buoys and different sensors. And we're looking to build on that to really, really start building out a workforce that will give us more sustainability about our leadership in this space. We also work with a wide range of utilities. We work with research institutions, and you know, we're constantly looking for new ways to build out infrastructure and really innovate.
You steal those names from The Little Mermaid? Is that what I picked up on? Of the boat?
No, Flotsam and Jetsam.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were initially managed by the Port of Cleveland. So they've had those for, I don't know, probably 10, 15 years or longer.
Okay.
And they're just these little boats. They fool around and pick stuff up and keep our riverways clean.
When do you expect that you'll be able to have enough data over time to analyze trends?
So you know, honestly, as soon as the data stream goes live, as soon as a buoy is deployed, it's the data that's coming off of that buoy is potentially very useful, depending on the stakeholders. So about 2 years ago, we started providing some data streaming to Cleveland Water, and that because we're able to put these buoys, multiple buoys in different locations, that information gives them, again, real-time insights on oxygen levels, for example. And that's been immediately helpful because those oxygen levels fluxing literally change the chemistry they need to use in order to ensure that they're treating the water. So historically, you know, it wasn't until they had the water inside of the facility for them to get, you know, kind of a cycle and be able to do the manual testing of what the oxygen looked like, for them to then decide to change the chemistry. Now they get advance notice of that before it even hits the intake to go into the utility, and they're able to seamlessly change the chemistry that they need to do. So that's one example. But we've also found that, for example, the National Weather Service has been using some of the information coming off of a couple of our buoys that actually has given them some insights on, you know, there's an interesting eddy at this one location that we've only heard about from sailors, and now we know what's actually going on. And then that in turn can give them more insights on microclimates, for example, micro weather things. So they're the real benefit is that it is real time, and so it actually can provide all kinds of benefits to a whole range of stakeholders.
What can we on the call do to protect our Great Lake or assist in creating more water awareness?
Well, I think you know, I think everyone who likes to be out near the water, be out near the water. That's the way you connect most closely with this incredible asset. And, you know, there are beach cleanups, there are, you know, all kinds of volunteer science network opportunities out there that, of course, if you're interested, there's just so many opportunities to actually engage and be a part of protecting this, this set of assets that we have.
And can any of the technologies that you mentioned today be of assistance in East Palestine waterways and ponds, or have they been?
So the East Palestine disaster is, I mean, it's so much beyond just water. I think there are some potential opportunities down the road for all kinds of waterways across the state, across the Great Lakes, and well beyond, to adopt similar models of building out kind of this telecommunications infrastructure that will enable some early warning systems if something is detected, for example. But none of those things will matter unless there's a whole systemic approach to how we respond to those types of concerns, as well as preventing them. So there's a whole range of different things to be considered around that. The regulatory side of things, what equipment is located in locations where we might be vulnerable to those risks, and then also having the infrastructure to detect and follow them.
We have time for one more question. So as the leader of innovations, which I just think is so cool to have in your title, what do you see the future for the Cleveland Water Alliance?
Well, I'm really excited about. I'm having a really fun time in this job, because we're doing things that are aiming high, which is my favorite thing to do. I feel like we have opportunities to build world-class opportunities in this region, and I think everyone on this call, if we aim high together, we can continue that trend and really build momentum. We've got a lot of things over the next couple of decades that may change how populations are moving to this region, as well as companies and businesses. And we can shape what that future looks like if we want to. We just have to decide to do it.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. We're excited to see the continued work of you and your team there. Thank you for giving us your time today. We really appreciate it.
Ebie,
Thank you. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to confess, when I first started exploring what today's topic was, I was a little confused by smart water, and you have really shed so much light on that. So thank you for your great work. Much continued success.